Hi, Ryan.
Hi, Rachel.
How are you?
I'm a bit out of my element. This is different.
Yeah, this isn't our usual style.
No, usually we stick to audio, but we're doing a bit of a visual presentation today. And
Yes.
for those of them listening on our podcast feed, we do have a video of this discussion up on our YouTube channel because we're doing something a little bit different, a little bit special than just reviewing episodes of science fiction television. Rachel, what's happening today?
We have a guest.
We've had guests before, Rachel.
Yes.
Is someone
but
here to
an
talk?
Extra special guest.
Oh, yeah? Have we brought someone on to talk about Star Trek Discovery or Babylon 5 or something?
No. We have somebody from Space Above and Beyond.
Yes, we are honored to have not only someone from Space Above and Beyond, but one of the main cast members of the show and someone who played our favorite character in the series. It's James Morrison, the man behind the man who is McQueen. Hello, James.
Hello, Ryan, Rachel. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, actually.
Well, that's great to hear.
Yeah, thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thanks.
It's such an honor to have you here. We haven't had the pleasure of talking to any of the people involved in the shows that we've covered on the podcast before. Like, a part of what we do is just we wanted to review the episodes of the show and go over them, how we feel and our experiences. And then when we do our social medias, every now and then we'll maybe tag someone from the show just to say, hey, here's a clip of us, or here's an observation that we had that we liked about, say, a performance or a piece of direction or piece of writing in the show. And it seemed with Space Above and Beyond, every time we did that, one of you guys, one of the cast members would react and reach out. And it was just such a joy to have that happen.
Oh, yeah, good. So I have a question for you to get things started. Do you mind?
No.
Sure.
What sort of inspired you or spurred you to become to move into interviewing on video on Zoom? What was it that made that happen?
I think just the opportunity came about. So we started chatting to people.
Was it in the works, though? I mean, was it in the plan, or
no?
To eventually do that, or no?
No. We were just focused on what we could do, and then the opportunity came up, and we seized it.
Yeah, with us, we never really went in wanting to chat to the people involved. At least for myself, I was just like, I don't want to bug the people who are in these shows in case they've moved on or they're on other things, or maybe they're just not interested in chatting about whatever project that we're talking about. But the enthusiasm that we got from people like yourself and Joel and other people in Space Above and Beyond when we were posting about our discussions of it just really spurred us on to say, well, let's talk to these guys, because this is a show. When we were talking about it on the podcast, we always mention like not enough discussion is had about the series itself, and and part of that I was just like, well, I want to talk about it even more after we're done talking about the show. And I thought, well, if people from the cast and crew are liking what we're saying, let's see if they want to sit down and have a bit of a chin wag with us, and if they have any interesting stories to tell us or any interesting memories of the series itself.
Yeah, it seemed the logical next step based on what I saw, and also based on Joel's enthusiasm for what you were doing. I mean, he contacted me and said, these guys really get the concept, they get the stories, they're smart, and they're, and I said, well, all right, I'll check them out. And he was right.
Thank you so much.
It's weird for us to be like, oh, people from this series may have listened to us, ramble on or say something about it. I know for Rachel and I, McQueen is a big fan favorite, and he's a favorite for both of us, and your performance and just your entire, role in the series was really a big thing for us. Like when we were starting the show, there was always that thing of like, for myself, I was revisiting it. I grew up with Space Above and Beyond, but Rachel hadn't seen it before.
Yeah.
And so there was always a level of when you revisit something or you're visiting it for the first time, does it hold up? Is it any good? And there was never any doubt with your performance in particular if there was something special to this series, because your performance and McQueen as a character from the very drop just had that certain quality, just grabbed you by the shoulders and said, this is something, there's something happening in this show. Even if the writing and the production is still figuring itself out, there's members of this cast in particular that just have a certain quality to them.
So you didn't notice that I was still figuring it out at the beginning either. That's nice. Thanks.
No.
Yeah, well, we all were, and we helped each other do that. That was the beautiful thing about it. We you can see that sort of that working together quality, and also the willingness of Glenn and Jim to mine that. I hesitate to use the word uneasiness, but there was the whole thing started with a war beginning, so that took everyone by surprise. And I think that the surprise of, wow, what are we doing? What are we doing here? How do we react to this? Especially when we were there in Australia working. It was so new, and everybody was figuring it out. But I think that translated as a real interesting tension that they exploited nicely.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that, because with the main members of the wildcards of the 58th, they're by design young and inexperienced and having to figure out the cost of war for themselves. But with McQueen, you're older, you've been in the game, you've gone through battles before, you're experienced and you're hardened. And so for us, the viewer, perhaps we can't recognize as easily that you, the performer, are still figuring things out, because your character has that lived-in confidence that the other members don't really have. And so that was probably another reason for why someone like Rachel, who's going through the show for the first time, McQueen is just this comfortable character.
Yeah, you don't question him because he's not questioning himself.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So we have
that's not what was happening at all in my head.
Yeah, exactly.
But and this wasn't revealed until later as the series went along. But it was a huge. McQueen suffered a huge setback and a change. That I mean, he was grounded. He could no longer fly. So that didn't come about until halfway through the season, I think. But that had to happen in the pilot, after that big attack, and when everybody came in, they were wounded. I was wounded, and then I took command of the 58th, and that was because I couldn't. I was grounded. So that all that story stuff was being revealed to us as we went along, and so I think it, like I said, the cross breeding of what is happening from two different directions sort of helped make each thing clearer, to the audience, which was, again, I think a credit to Glenn and Jim and their willingness to go, let's exploit that strength of that character, of that actor, and make that a character thing. They were very willing to do that. And most showrunners and creators aren't. I mean, this is the way it's going to be. This is how we planned it. You've got to adapt to this. But they let the dynamic of the relationships reveal what they needed from a story standpoint, which was, pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think a lot of magic happens when showrunners and writers and directors are receptive to that and to the actors, because that really makes it feel lived in.
There was also, with Space Above and Beyond, there was a sense of good continuity within the series. So when we get revealed that McQueen is grounded because of what happened in the pilot, maybe it didn't get said in the pilot, but we, the audience, can believe that because of when we met you in that pilot, you had a big scar on your face and you had just lost all of your men and you were having to serve the role in the end of that episode that you did for the rest of the series, which is be the guy, back at home telling them what to do. And then eventually when they reveal a certain thing, we can buy it because space really did have a great sense of calling back to itself, even if, say, some of those things weren't planned out. We, the viewer at home, don't know that because it's like, hey, they brought that little element back when a lot of sci-fi shows in particular back then really didn't do that all that often. They may call back to certain things, but not as frequently as space did.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The other thing that, as we look back on this now, what is it, 25 years? Almost 30 years, I think. Anyway, a long time. You're in your first series. That was my first series, and I had no idea what was going to come in episode 2. Oh, they didn't sit us down and say, "Okay, here's the arc." What Glenn did a lot of was say, "What do you think?" For instance, my name. What do you think your name is? Your full name. Yeah, and he let me name my character. What books do you think are in your room? What would you be reading? Who do you admire? As McQueen, so that we can create this life in your. When they went into my quarters, later on. But they didn't. I'm trying to connect with my train of thought. I just lost it a sec. Hang on a sec.
But you had some input on what
we had some input. But my point was, you're in your first series and you think, oh, I've got to show and know everything in this episode. I mean, I may. You're trained as an actor to think, my God, I got to get this job. I may die tomorrow. I've got to put everything I know into this moment, instead of letting it gradually, like you say, reveal itself, gradually unfold. So that was looking back. I think if I had it to do again, I would have actually pulled back a little bit, just because when you walk into a room and you've got a huge scar on your face, people are going to go, what happened to this guy? They don't have to know. They have to wonder. And that's every bit as powerful as, you don't have to do anything with that as the actor. You just have to have the scar. The scar does the acting. My reputation as McQueen did everything I needed to do, and I wouldn't have had to do anything. You see what I mean? I came into this situation with those kids, really, newbies, with this reputation. I could just stand there and have it.
Yeah. One of the things I noted when we were going through the series that at least made me drawn to your performance was you never broke eye contact with anyone you were speaking with, and that made McQueen have just a certain edge to him. Like every time you were talking to someone, not only would you stare at them, but your eyes would be like darting around inspecting their body language, and that was just such a specific thing to this character. So it's like
always assessing.
He's always on. Like rarely did we get to see McQueen just chill out, and that was one of the cool things about the show was we eventually got to see aspects of him, on downtime a little bit. But when we're starting it, it's just this energy of just I need to be in control of things. That was just really alluring about it, because the other characters are unsure of themselves, or if they are, there's such a cockiness to them. But with McQueen, it was like you have the famous like payback's a bitch and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But we do have some questions.
There's a psychologist. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go on.
There's a really complicated psychology that someone who's been in a war carries with them, and when you're born to that, like he was, he was created for that.
Yeah,
So that's
he's
really
going to
all
be
he
here for the
knew.
next one, as you say in the show. It's like, I'm going to be here for the next
Yeah.
one. That's what I'm good for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's what he was made for. Actually, I mean, sort of born into indentured servitude
Yeah.
for the next war. Right?
Yeah. So to rewind a bit, Rachel, you can start us off. We wrote some questions down that we're keen to get into, and some of which we've already touched a little on. But Rachel, where do you want to begin with everything?
I think I want to ask, how did you first get involved with Space Above and Beyond, and what drew you to it as a project?
Well, it was like any other audition. I mean, it came up a new series. It was cast by someone that I knew, Randy Stone, the late great Randy Stone, who had seen me in a play, the play that I met my wife in, actually, in 1988.
Hmm.
And he saw that it ran forever. It was a huge hit in the local theater scene. Happened during the writer's strike of '88. So nobody was working. Everybody came to see it. It ran forever. And I think Randy had seen it, according to him, 35, 40 times.
Wow.
It was an amazing cast. And it was one of those where you just come to watch these people be in this hotel room in the middle of a war zone in El Salvador. Journalists.
Mm.
So when they were casting this series, he brought me in to read from a Queen, and I think based on the these things sometimes happen when you walk into a room and you just go, okay, this is a perfect fit, and he knew that. So you go to network and you go through that gauntlet. Back in the days when there were 35 people in the room, when you come in, and I did the monologue where after I threw the table over in the pilot. It's okay to be scared, that whole thing.
Yeah. I was curious if that was your audition monologue, because in the pilot there's a lot of monologues.
That was it. Yeah. And I got to do it to the room. To the network executives. They were the pilots that I was talking to. So that sort of gave me the edge over the room. I was in control. And it was a perfect alignment of the stars, sort of moment.
Yeah, I actually was going to ask what the audition process was like, because I was looking at your IMDb and it also has a director credits as well, and I was curious about that. And it seems like you and your wife have a documentary, at least it says on there, about the auditioning process. And
right, yeah.
I was oh yeah, there it is. And I was just curious of what it was like to do this, because it was also, as you said, like one of your first, big things. Like this was one of your, first big shows where you're in a prominent position in it as well. So yeah, and the catacall of all of the execs in the room. So has that side of it changed over the years?
Well, it's the only other time it was the first time I went to network for a series. So I'd been here 6 years, I think. No, wait, 95. No, I came here 83, 82. So I don't know, 13 years. First time I'd ever gone to network. I just couldn't get, brought in for I don't know. It was one of those things. I've never had a really great record with going to network for series. The other time, on 24, I came in sort of through the back door. They brought this character in, and I was episode to episode until they finally said at the end of the season, they said, we're going to make you a regular.
Yeah. So you were kind of like what Tucker Smallwood was for Space Above and Beyond, where you were initially just a guy that came in for an episode, and then they kept bringing you back and back and back and back. And
recurring. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know how that worked with Tucker. I'm not sure they ever gave him a cut. Well, we only went one season, so I don't think he ever got a contract.
No. And he was never in the opening credits of the show at any point either, even though they changed the opening credits like 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a recurring character. I think they had a plan for him to be that, though. They didn't know on 24 what was going to happen with Buchanan. They went through this upheaval that took everybody by surprise, I think, and needed to shake things up and bring some new blood in. And so it turned out that there was chemistry. The chemistry test, in other words, for that role was while the series was happening, as opposed to a meeting like this on Zoom or a meeting in the room,
Yeah.
I don't recall any kind of chemistry meetings at all on Space Above and Beyond. I think I remember seeing Morgan and Rodney at the network meetings. They were in the hallway. We each went in, and I remember Morgan went in for his meeting and then split, and they came out and we're looking for him. Where is he? They want to see him again, and he was gone, man. He was already at home. So that was funny. Yeah.
So was there something specific that drew you to McQueen as a character when you were initially getting pulled in for those auditions and looking at that script and seeing that table flip monologue for the first time?
Yeah, I think the thing that struck me was that there was this mysterious badass coming down from the mountains sort of quality. The Jeremiah Johnson of war, where he can't stand civilization anymore, so he goes up into the mountains, and then when he comes back down into to civilization, everybody goes, "Ooh, that's that guy." So he comes with that air of mystery. It's the thing I was just talking about how you have so much to going on in terms of the history that you don't really have to do anything as an actor. You can just stand there, and everybody else creates your story for you. Based on their understanding of you, their misgivings, the mythology of it. That's the thing that struck me most, I think.
With the pilot episode, it was very obvious to us from the landscapes and certain actors that appeared that it was filmed down here in Australia. And we were curious if you have any stories about that time or that whole process of having to fly down to a different country to film a pilot for a series.
Well, first of all, it's a beautiful country, and I miss it. I've missed it every day since we left. I really felt at home there for some reason. The spiders and snakes notwithstanding.
Well, did you have any encounters with those?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Did you have any encounters with those?
I had a tragic encounter when we went to out on location when I first met the rest of the cast, actually. I was in the hotel room, and I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a giant, as big as my hand, spider. And I flipped out. I had my golf clubs with me, and I ran and got my driver, and
oh boy,
yeah, made short work of it. And so in the morning, I went to the front desk, and I said, I had a scare last night. There was a giant spider in my. Oh, that was a huntsman, mate.
As soon as you said that, I was just like, oh, that's a huntsman.
They're friendly, kind of.
Don't worry about it. Like, it kills all the spiders.
They'll crawl into bed with you and cuddle.
Yeah. Like, there's nothing to worry about with that one.
It's not going to be cuddling with anybody anymore.
Nah, man.
But no, I love Australia, and I spent a lot of time alone there because they wouldn't let me. They were all working. First of all, I wasn't in the pilot that much. I think out of the month I was there, I worked 10 days. I spent a lot of time golfing with Lee Ermey.
Oh wow!
We spent a lot of time. I got to know him really well. But I didn't get to know the rest of the cast. I remember having a conversation with Kristen. We passed each other coming from town, or I was going in and she was going home, and we had one conversation. But they wanted to create this separation between me and the rest of the cast, so they didn't put me in the same place with them. They didn't let us, fraternize at all, really. So
That makes sense at the beginning, right? Because you are not a part of their team, and then at the end, it's a surprise. Because I remember when Rachel and I were going through it for the podcast, I knew that McQueen was a big character in the series, but there were some in the pilot that you aren't aware of are as big as they are. Like you and Wang in particular. It's like, oh, by the way, Rachel, they're going to be mainstays in the show going forward. And it was like, oh, okay, sure, I'm for that. We'll see how it all plays out. Because, yeah, you're a part of a different group in the pilot. You have your Angry Angels and you're all in black.
mm-hmm.
Your berets.
Yeah, I think, I looking back, I wish they had asked me, which they ended up doing on a lot of stuff. How do you feel about this? What's your ideas here? I think I would have said, no, I want to get to know these guys. Well, we can pretend like we're, all the things you just stated. We can pretend like we're not in the same worlds, and because I'm not, in terms of working with other people, I'm not, the method. If it's myself and it doesn't get any on the other actors, so to speak, than I am. But I don't need to create a separation between myself and the other actors. I can pretend that stuff,
Right. So you've never had to come back down here. No other films or TV shows have brought you back down to Australia. No holidays.
I wish. Well, there was a talk for a minute of doing a series there. When they signed us in the contract, I remember, we may shoot in Australia. We're just not sure yet. So, but instead they shot it in Culver City, and at the time, I think it was the most expensive series on television because they built these planets in the sound stages, and I mean, you walk into this giant sound stage and the planet Minerva, suddenly appeared.
You also had like the Saratoga, and it had the hangar bay with the very elaborate set there, and the things rising out of the floor, and it was very for a first season of a science fiction show in particular. It was one where you could really tell where the budget went, mainly in like the sets and stuff, and the stunts and all of the explosions and guns and everything that you guys had.
That's right, and the CGI too at the time was, I think, some of the best.
Right. So up until Space Above and Beyond, as you've gone over a bit, your career on TV was mainly in like one and done roles, small roles, maybe some other little recurring guest spots. So when you did end up as a series regular in this, how did it feel? How did it impact you? And was there anything you had to prepare yourself for as an actor when it came to being someone who's going to have a character that's ongoing?
I think the biggest change was that I could finally pay my bills.
That's always nice.
I was making money for the first time. So this was 95. I'd been an actor already for over 20 years. And I was just hand to mouth. I mean, I was working in the theater, which you can't really make your living doing, with the occasional TV job. I think I'd been in SAG for a little over 10 years at the time. So, yeah, that's the thing I think that changed me the most.
With your character of McQueen, you obviously having to play someone with a military background, and You mentioned that you got to spend time with someone like Ali Ermi, for instance, but was there anything that you had to do in your approach to this character? Was there any research or any conversations to help you understand the military mindset to authentically portray this character?
I'm one of those actors that this is my favorite take on this, and it's a quote by Robert Duvall. He said, you can do, if you're playing a fireman or something, you can do all the research in the world. You can read about it. You can, study it, and you can study the job, and you can do all but when it comes down to it, it's between you and the other guy. And that's basically it. I mean, I knew enough about what their approach to this story was going to be in terms of the World War II aspect and the marriage of those two genres. That I grew up on those movies. I mean, I grew up on all the World War II movies from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So, I had a sense of that already, but I think I'm trying to serve the story, and it was all there. I mean, anything that doesn't have anything to do with the story is sort of an anathema to the work. So their stories were really clear, and that's what attracted you to them. Mm. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but their stories are so clear, and it's just all there.
Yeah, because when we were like going through it all, there was this question in the air of, does this actor have any experiences with him, like in his life with the military? Because it just felt so authentic, especially when paired up against like Tucker Smallwood, who does have real life experiences with those things, and your two characters being the older ones in the group who have had several years within this life. It just we never questioned the character, but we're like, does this actor, has he got someone in his family, or has he gone through it himself? And it's like, doing minor research, I'm like, I can't find anything. He just must be really good at what he does as an actor. But I assumed with this show that there may have been like military advisors or who knows what, that could have just been offering some pieces of advice along the way.
Yeah, I'm sure, they were on the set. They were the guys that said, this is how the uniform goes, and this is how this color guard goes, and but Tom Wright was a vet too. He was a Vietnam vet, Tom Wright, who directed several of the episodes. But ultimately, my training as an actor is that imagination is more important than knowledge, as Albert Einstein so famously said. So if you're willing to submit to the situation, the circumstances, and the conditions of the story completely, then someone can say, oh, wow, when did you serve? And you go, yeah, no, I never did. I serve in this series. And, so I think that's the key to it right there. Any young actors listening, you don't have to actually fight in a war to pretend to be a warrior, so don't do that just for that reason.
Yeah. And you were sort of touching on that when you were talking about how it was just like, I can pretend not to know these people. You don't actually have to keep me separate. Did that sort of segregation of you from the cast change as the series went on?
Oh, sure, yeah, because I became. I mean, I had these discussions with Glenn Morgan. I would say, I don't think if we go in this direction with our relationships, I think we run the risk of my becoming one of them, or because, and I'm not, and I can't be. I have to maintain that. We have to get close. Because when you're in the foxhole with with someone, that's what you do. You get close when you're in a life or death situation. But there still has to be that distance between the commander and the troops, you know. So, but it didn't need to happen in the off camera life. I'm talking about the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, we became very close, and we hung around. I mean, to this day, you know, these are some of the closest friends that I have in my life. So,
Well, could you tell us a little bit about like each of the cast members and what they're like to work with, and how you gelled with them, and any interesting little stories? Because you see it in the show too that they had an affection for you. Heck, even an impression of you makes it into an episode. So
yeah,
there seems to have been a very positive atmosphere behind the scenes of a rather dour show.
Mm.
yeah. I mean, that reminds me of the when the network said to them, you know, we need to lighten this thing up. We need to, can you send them on vacation? You know, they said,
And that's how
"Wait a
you get
minute."
Coolio.
That's how you get Coolio.
Says, yeah, this is they're in a war zone. This is a war. They don't go on vacation. Well, but can you send them on R&R or something? And so yeah, we ended up watching, you know, W.C. Fields movies and playing basketball and you know, having almost what felt like a sort of an incestuous relationship, you know, between. Oh boy. So can I talk a little bit about our relationships? You know, we were pals. We didn't have a lot of time to hang when we weren't working because, you know, we were working 15, 16-hour days. So when we were wrapped, we would go home and go to sleep, eat dinner and go to sleep. But yeah, no, we were on the set, we were tight. And in terms of the work, I mean, there were different levels of experience. You know, Rodney, I don't think had ever done much acting. He was a model.
Hmm.
I mean, you know, he was the and Joel was just out of school. I mean, they were young, and everybody had a different method of work. Everybody had different ways of working, and you know, there were moments of tension because it was a hard shoot. You know, you're getting bombs blown up at you and dirt thrown in your face, and I mean, it's just like any other thing. But it isn't a. There's no training process for it. You know, like on these war movies, you hear stories about, oh yeah, we trained for 3 months, you know, in the jungle and we got military. No, we were thrown into a war without any kind of training. We had no boot camp. And so that was sometimes would create a little bit of tension.
Mm.
Like most of us just, you know, especially with the gear that we had to work with and some of the situations, you know, there would be moments of tension, but nothing serious, nothing serious. And we'd figure it out right away.
With most shows too, even with a large ensemble, you would get breaks of things like here's an A plot, so these actors are in that plot, and here's a B plot, and those actors are in that plot, and they film on these different days. But with Space Above and Beyond, for the majority of the time, you're all in every scene together. If anything,
that's right.
your character's the one that had off time from the rest of the cast because you would be back on the Saratoga with Commodore Ross talking about what they're doing on the ground.
Yeah, and I had a much easier time of it. That's for sure.
But
that wasn't lost on me.
No.
Wasn't lost on me.
But then you became an action guy at the tail end of the show. Like you're on the ground running around having bombs in your face. Yes. So you did get your taste of it as well.
And as the old guy who wanted to be, you know, I was old at the time. What was I? 40. I think I just turned 40, 41. But you know, that's time when an athlete, you know, is retired. already. So the stuff that they were, in fact, when I blew my knee out, people say, "How did you tear your ACL?" And I say, "Well, I was fighting Chigs on the planet Minerva." They, they go, "What? What?"
Huh?
You had to
I did
be
one
there.
playing basketball and one I was, fighting Chigs, because I wanted to still be a 25-year-old running around like I could still do that stuff. In fact, I still do. I just did a thing in Hawaii last year, and I had two fight scenes, and I learned them in a day and a half. Oh, not even, maybe 6 hours total. And the stunt coordinator said, we just did two fights, and in a movie we would have, a week and a half of rehearsal, and it would take a few days to shoot. And we just shot both fight scenes in one day and rehearsed them in 6 hours. And that's what the difference between TV and film. So we were doing all that stuff on Space Above and Beyond at the same rate of speed, because you have to.
Mm.
You shoot quickly. And that was stressful. That was stressful.
One of our favorite things about the series was the relationship between Ross and McQueen, and just the chemistry between the two actors. And we were talking earlier before about how there are some shows where it's like, or some projects where it's like there's chemistry tests and things like that. But for Space, obviously, there really wasn't. But was there something in particular you felt as the performer that the character of Commodore Ross brought out of your character, and working opposite Tucker Smallwood brought out as an actor for you? Because as viewers, it really came across that way. Like these two characters and these two actors just really transforming one another. Yeah, there's sparks there.
I think I think it was a mutual respect, and I think again, it was, we were of a certain age and an experience. To me, people talk about chemistry and they talk about that stuff like it's a mystery. Like those two actors really had they had sparks, so they had chemistry. But to me, it's just when people are completely 100% present, they can have chemistry with anybody. And because I've worked with actors, and I'm working with, and I'm going, what is it I feel here? It's a with me, it's a discomfort, and it's because they're not really there. They're somewhere else. They're thinking about something else. They're not listening. But with somebody like Tucker, when you're working with Tucker, or somebody that you have that with, and we had that in moments with everybody, had that with each other in this thing. It was because we were completely present. There was nobody else in the world when we were with these people. Nothing else mattered in the world. And that's to me what chemistry is. You can see it. It's not those two, they were really in love. Seemed like they were really in love. No, they were with each other only. They weren't distracted by the monkeys in their head, or themselves, or how they looked, or And when that happens, it's magic, and people call it chemistry. But to me, it's just being absolutely in the moment.
Yeah, and also, it's also what the writing can bring out of things too, because what I really love about the McQueen-Ross relationship is it brings out all of these vulnerable sides of McQueen that he can't share with the 58th, because the 58th are below him, but Ross is above McQueen, and you get lots of conversations of just expressing one's feelings in the moment. And I always think of like something like Sugar Dirt, for instance, in which you're wanting to go back down to the planet, and you want to go and save the boys, and Ross is telling you, no, I'm not going to let you do that, and it's like, come on, let me do it as a friend. It's like, no, I'm not letting you go as a friend. I'm not letting you go as well as an officer. And I think it's stuff like that makes McQueen interesting, because at the beginning, a lot of these characters are archetypes. They're very specific. Like, if this was a cop show, you would be the chief behind the desk who's handing out the mission, like the case for the guys to go off on. But then, as we went along with it, there was just all of these new dynamics at play with the characters, especially with your character, and having someone like Commodore Ross, who, again, like, he comes in the like first proper episode, like after the pilot, and there's a sense of like, oh, is this guy going to come back? And the more he came back, the more it made McQueen feel more than just the guy with the stick up his butt who's going to tell them that they need to obey the rules of the Marine Corps.
Yeah. So he took the stick out of my butt. Yeah, he did.
Yeah. While he played guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it comes down to also. God, I just lost my train of thought again. Sorry. Speaking of being in the moment. Yeah. No, we had an amazing relationship, and here's what I was going to say. With us being vets. We knew that every moment in that situation was life and death. Every decision we made was life and death. Somebody's life hung in the balance. And the more you come to respect somebody, the less you want them to die. So there's a level of respect, but we understood that if it's not life and death, it's not worth a shit. And that's what the show is,
Yeah, it's not about killing an alien enemy. It's about the toll that war takes on the young and generations itself. And
that's right.
Rachel, I think you have one of the big important questions that most people would, I imagine, ask of someone in the show themselves.
Yeah. What's your favorite episode and why?
Oh, wow. Well, the Angriest Angel is an obvious choice.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the second of the two-part, if I remember right. Never Know More and the Angriest Angel. Yeah, those two. I love the one with Morgan too, though. The
Stay with the Dead.
Oh yeah. Oh man, that's a good one. Everybody had their moments. Everybody has their such great moments. Pearly was another one. I mean, I loved that one. Because Martin, was so wonderful in that. Yeah, I think what did I just name? 4?
Yeah.
Yeah, considering how few episodes there are a lot that really stand out. And I think you're really right that like it's almost harder to pick one favorite episode because each of those characters have an episode where they get their moment.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's just like, oh, but I really like when this character does this thing and this character does that. Do you have a specific moment like that for McQueen, though?
Oh, I love that dogfight, the dogfight in the Angriest Angel, because it's so. When I first saw that, it was just, at the time, like I said before, the CGI effects were. That was the state of the art, and they had pushed the envelope with that stuff. But the way they were designed and the because it's not just the image itself; it's the pacing, it's the entirety of the filmmaking experience when you're doing a CGI, space fight. or dogfight in space.
Yeah.
And it had that quality of the the Red Baron sort of classic,
Yeah.
World War II stuff. Oh, it was fantastic.
I think
And
as
the whole,
sci-fi fans, you have to accept as time marches on that the special effects and the CGI and even models will date out, but it's about the rest of it. It's like the story, the characters, and how it's constructed, the direction. And I think with the dogfight in particular, it's that music too. Like the music is one of the most important aspects of Space Above and Beyond. It's calling back to a lot of stuff, but it's also bringing its own edge to it as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, we look back in the original Star Wars, the very first Star Wars. I mean, the special effects are just goofy now. And yet the storytelling is so incredible. And the characters, I mean, they're just, and also, what it started this whole thing. But at the time, it blew everybody's minds,
With the series, there was a lot of interesting names that popped up, both as directors and guest star actors. And I was just really wanting to know, for yourself, as someone who was a regular there, were there any guest star actors that you really liked working with or you think did a really good job, as well as directors on the show that you really thought captured what this series was about?
Sure, yeah. As I mentioned, Martin Jarvis was incredible in Pearly as the lieutenant, and I loved every minute of that one. And that was directed by Charles Morton Smith, who was one of my favorite directors to work with on the show, and also one of my favorite actors. He was in several great films, but the Farley Mowat story. Oh God, the wolf. What was it called? Oh well, I remembered the author. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I know he's in The Untouchables as well, and
he's in The Untouchables, and of course American Graffiti, and he was fun to work with as a director. But I have to say, my experience working with Tom Wright, who directed so many of the episodes, and also directed my episode of Millennium that Glenn and Jim wrote for me. That was a great experience, but because Tom brought he was a Vietnam vet with a really amazing story, and I only heard a little bit of it. In fact, I can't even repeat it because it just feels like it's sort of sacrosanct, But these guys that came back from Vietnam, their stories are. And I've been honored with a few of them because I've played a couple of Vietnam vets, one on stage in a role that's particularly memorable for me in Emily Mann's Still Life. So I heard these stories and I talked to these guys and I knew them. I mean, they're from my generation. I barely missed the war myself in terms of being drafted. But Tom's approach to filmmaking and his history, he was Alfred Hitchcock's storyboard artist in I don't even know how many, a couple of his films, of his last films, and he just has an artist's eye, but his approach to these war. When I forget the episode where I broke my rib, I broke a couple of ribs, and I just jumped on a gun
Oh wow!
We were in a foxhole. I think I was coming across to grab Rodney and scream at him or something.
Yeah, that happened a bunch.
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess R and R.
Yeah, it did. It happened a few times, didn't it? He was always doing something to piss me off.
Yeah.
And so I had to keep screaming after I'd broken my rib, and I didn't know what it was, but every time I took a breath, it was just like somebody sticking a bayonet in my ribs. So finally, I went to Tom and I said, "Listen, is there a waiter, can I go? I need to go to the. Can I go to the hospital? I'm dying, man. And he said, no. They're just going to put tape on it and send you back. Just suck it up, man. I just
Wow.
because he'd been in an actual war. This was a
Yeah.
fucking TV show. This was nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, if my arms had been hacked off, he probably would have said, just a flesh wound.
Because
Get back out there.
there was quite an eclectic a group of people in Space Above and Beyond. Like behind the camera, if you know directors, there's like familiar names of of sci-fi television, but of like action TV as well, and dramas, and some of the ones you've mentioned I'm familiar with as well. And we also review episodes of Babylon 5, and one of the directors there was also on Space, Jesus Trevino. He was one. And there's also just some actors that you wouldn't expect to be in this type of gritty war show, but then you look back at the time period of their career and you go, oh, okay, so that's
why David Duchovny's here.
Yeah, David Duchovny did a weird performance, but like French Stewart is in one of the first episodes, and we all know him for comedy, but he's a serious performance, and same with Richard Kind.
Richard Kind. I'm sorry, who?
French Stewart.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and Richard Kind is also
Richard was on it, yeah.
And they're serious. They're known for comedy, primarily now in their like film and TV work. But you
Sure.
come back to space, and there they are, being like hardened military figures who have seen the shit.
Sure, yeah. Joel Polis was in one. I remember. Oh wow! Now, of course, I can't remember anybody who was in it. Well. Yeah, name a couple of other actors.
I really loved your scenes with Harriet Sansom Harris, where she was Hayden. It has my favorite. I think it's my favorite piece of writing in the entire series, in which you're jailed up and you're having the conversation about standing up and rising up against the system. And she has this.
Was it Eyes? Was that?
Yeah, that was Eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, how did I remember that?
And she has this whole diatribe about like that's very prescient. That's very prescient, and that's some of the great stuff about Space Above and Beyond. It's hitting a lot of things that still ring true today, where she's talking about people would rather believe what they feel than the facts, and we have to work very quietly against them because if you do speak up, they won't like it, and your character's arguing that you still have to have principles to go against.
Yeah, that stuff is never. It's interesting you bring that up, because people now are saying, and it's in our country, we've never been more divided. We're such a divided. Yes, we have.
Mm-hmm.
For about 200 years.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, we fought a war. We fought a civil war about that. We were divided during every war. Well, the World War II, we were unified. The Vietnam era, please, the 60s. Somebody was saying, the danger exists. The danger of the next Trump presidency was, he could bring out the military, or something. Well, that's already happened. Yeah. It happened during the 60s. Kennedy did it.
Mm-hmm. And got Reaganisms, and it's a thing that's why it's like
happened before in one way or another.
And like with any, not only just science fiction story, but stories of war, it's about how certain things, certain injustices, certain concerns, certain problems about the system continue. Like you could set Space Above and Beyond in the future, and you film it in the 90s, but when we watch it in 2023, it still rings true. It still feels as if it's commenting on things that matter now.
Well, and the other thing that would have been great if it had happened, it would have been amazing, is if we had a population of Chigs on Earth when they attacked. Sent to internment camps. I mean, that would have been, instead they chose to do what were we called? Nipple necks?
The tanks.
The
Which
tanks. Yeah.
actually
That
goes
was the population
into one of Rachel's got one of the questions. When we were going over questions, it's like, oh, we have to ask certain things about like the themes and the messagings of the show.
So the tanks were an allegory for bigotry. How successful do you think the series was at tackling that really hefty subject matter?
I think I don't know. I think they probably may look at it the same way, but I think they could have even gone further with it. And they may have in subsequent seasons if we'd gone on. They probably went about as far as they could. But there was so many things working against them telling the stories that they wanted to tell. I mean, they hired these two guys, these young writers from X-Files, and I mean that's dark stuff. And they wanted them to do this wartime thing that was going to happen and be aired at 7 p.m. on Sunday, which is when the family is with the kids and watching, and you go, yeah, I don't think they really knew what they were getting. Or what they wanted.
It's a hard show to pitch, even still when you measure it up of the science fiction TV landscape of that time. Yeah. You still had Star Trek dominating. You had Babylon 5. You had others, but Space Above and Beyond was going in a very specific and particular direction that is challenging. And like with the bigotry stuff, with the stuff, it wasn't just the tanks, it was the chigs, and it was just something that was rippling through the show. Like, for instance, Dear Earth is one of our favorite episodes. It's a fun episode. It's a slice of life. We get all of these little stories, but your bit in that episode is to sit down and talk with the news crew about this horrifying instance of injustice against the tanks that you can relate back to what happened in so many things, not just in American history, but in Australian history and so many other places.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good example. The other problem that we run up against when we're talking about this, about a series that was almost 30 years ago on television, is presentism, because we've come so far in terms of the way we deal with bigotry and racism and every other kind of phobia that there is, bigotry. We judge the stuff in the past based on where we are now, and it's not really fair. It's not fair to say. It's no more fair to say, well, that Roosevelt really blew it, with the Japanese American. Well, the whole country blew it. That was the thing then. His wife had to do this, incorporating Black Americans into the fold and sort of behind the scenes, because we were a racist country.
Yeah.
So we, but when we look back on that stuff, we hold it, we judge it by today's standards, and that you can't do that.
Yeah, and I think
the same thing applies when looking back on the show. How did we fail? How far did we go? Oh yeah, we could have gone much further, but it wouldn't have been possible. It wasn't possible.
Yeah.
I think they went as far as they could.
I agree. And I think the problem with this stuff inherently, when you're using science fiction for using it for allegories of something in the real world, like racial inequality, there's always going to be there's always within that genre a push and pull of things. Like with the tanks, it's like, yeah, we can equate them to this group, but also at the same time, these real groups in real life aren't genetically engineered people in tubes, they are people.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest complaint, and we also came across the series from this light, like, there's obviously a level of like, you're looking at something in the moment now, so you have to do that. But we also was like, at that period of time, like, what were these shows, especially like in the science fiction landscape, what were they commenting on and how were they doing it? And I think the major complaint that I have, at least with the tanks, is, from like my point of view, is just like someone now watching it, it's just like, it's very much relating to certain racial minority groups, but the two tanks are like handsome white guys. Being like, I suffered these things. I'm like,
yeah, they're palatable to the audience.
Well, to me, it's like watching reruns of Friends and watching, God, these guys really have hard lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was also something with a lot of science fiction shows, or even shows still to this day, where you have members of the cast that, of a certain ethnicity. It feels like they have to comment on that. But with Space Above and Beyond, like they never really made stories about how Wang is an Asian man, or Commodore Ross is a African-American man in a high rank. It was just like, they are those things, and they are characters. We don't have to do that, but we spend the sci-fi concepts of like the tanks and the chigs to explore those issues in the real world.
There is still an other, but the other has shifted due to the sci-fi setting.
That's right. And that's actually to its credit, I think, because to God, not too many years before this happened, actually, they used to do things like at the theaters here, and they do these, they called them non-traditional casting symposiums, where they would cast Mary Alice, who was a wonderful Black actress, as Julius Caesar, and not say anything about it, just like, well, no, that's Julius Caesar. There's no need to comment on it. It's just what it is. And so that at that point, that the seeds were being planted to be able to just go, yeah, no, anybody can do these parts. It doesn't, you don't have to look at it and go, yeah, but would a Black, because I was doing a scene with James Earl Jones in one of these things from Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Mm-hmm. And he said, if I ever do this part, Big Daddy, I'd have to do it as a white man. And I said, what? Really? Well, yeah, no Black man would ever rise to the station that Big Daddy. He would never be a landowner. Wouldn't own. Have these generational Black servants that haven't left the plantation. Mm-hmm. and just wouldn't happen in the South. And yet, this was 1988. I don't know when they did the Broadway production of an all-Black cast of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, in which he played Big Daddy, but he changed his mind in that time because society changed its mind. Something happened, together. I don't know exactly what my point is, except that, we're looking back at this show now almost 30 years later and trying to judge it based on what, based on.
Yeah. Well, it's also a series that when it's discussed, it's always in the reference of its cancellation, that it was gone too soon, and that a part of the reason why, say, someone like us looks at it from the present in this very presentism way is it was doing things that other shows would eventually get the opportunity to do in much greater detail. And it's been well documented, that the network didn't really get the show, they didn't really like the show. But as someone who was in it day to day, was that present? Was that obvious? Did that get back to you? And, and how did it impact you as an actor working on this series, seeing if you did see like that there was this looming noose around the neck of the show?
Well, my favorite story about that is, and I forget the guy's name, but he was the head of the network, and he was the guy that I did my speech to when I did my, he was sitting right in front of me, and I'm not going to say his name anyway, but we went to the same gym. So I showed up one day and he was sitting in the sauna and I walked in and so we're both naked sitting there, started talking about the show. And he said, I came up with a great idea for somebody to play your father. And I said, I don't have a father.
No, not going to work here.
A scientist, perhaps.
Oh no, this will work. This will work. He says, yeah, no, this will work. I mean, it just went right over his. And I said, oh, okay, who are you thinking of? And he told me, I forget who it was. And I went, wow, I left and I was just going, wow, there it is right there. He has no idea what we're doing. And that's my best example of they just really didn't know. It just didn't have a clue. And so the other example, of course, is when, we did this 6 regulars in the show. And when we came back from Australia, they started putting out the PR for it. And they had the 3 kids, which were the 3 kids that they were pushing. And then every other PR picture had like 3 Australian actors that were redshirted, in the pilot. They weren't even in it. And so I was going, and then they occasionally have a picture of Lanai and Joel, sort of thrown in for good measure, but never the 6 of us. They had nothing. Because they didn't know. They just didn't know who was in it, what we were doing, who had contracts, who didn't.
Yeah, it's fascinating because you're the I would say it's fair to say you're the fan favorite character of the show, but when you look up promotional material like stills and whatnot, the best you get is behind the scenes esque type photos or something or other. Like there's not a lot of like the group together and not as much of McQueen, considering like McQueen is the big draw for many people.
Yeah. They did that. They started doing that about, I don't know, 6 episodes, 7 episodes in. They finally went, oh, who's this? This guy's in it. He's in it a lot. We should go. Maybe we should take some pictures of him. And also, I was vocal about it. I said, I'm getting a lot of. I need to. What's going on here? And Glenn, I would talk to Glenn about it. He'd just go, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't get it. So, but finally, they started to sort of things, and I knew they would eventually. But it got to me for a second.
Yeah,
I was grateful. At the same time, I was going. People are asking me for a picture of McQueen, and I don't have one. Could we do that? That stuff. So, it seemed trivial at the time, and it seems trivial now to talk about it. But it was a real thing.
Yeah. So obviously, it wasn't like the best experience, sort of dealing with that network stuff, and you, I assume, were aware of some of those problems as you were shooting. But how did you find out that the show was like officially cancelled?
Let's see. I think we read it in the newspaper.
Wow.
Yeah. And you'll hear this from Joel too. We were watching the last episode together at my house when it aired, and he saw himself get blown up. And we just both looked at each other, and I laughed. I mean, I just laughed like, oh my God, that's, it's like when somebody hurts themselves, they bump their elbow or something. You're a kid and you laugh.
Nervous laugh.
And you go, oh, sorry, I know. And they're hurt, But so I just laughed because it was such a surprise. And the look on his face was, oh, fuck, I'm dead. What happened? Because they put that in post,
They didn't tell him.
Oh, no. We didn't know.
Wow, so that's just one of those where you had to see it when it came on, and just you're experiencing how it turns out. Wow.
Yeah. It was a shocker.
That last episode is just gut punch after gut punch. It's not because like your character you get it real bad in the end. Like you lose a leg in the end, and then there's this sense of like, well, you're going back home, and that's a bad thing. And then we're just like, well, goodbye, McQueen, one of the most beloved characters of the show. You're just wheeled out, and it's not without. It's not. There's no great like ceremony to it. It's just very matter of fact, and I think. Weirdly enough,
this is what happens to somebody who's wounded.
Yeah, but I think weirdly enough that serves to what this series was about. There is like when the time calls for it, there is no glory to the horrors of the war going on.
You'll get when you talk to Glenn Morgan, you'll get the story about how that last episode played out. I'm not gonna spoil it. And he's better to tell it anyway because it happened to him from his perspective. We were just, like I said, Joel and I were just an audience at that point. And you'll get it from Joel too. I mean, it was a shocker. We were blown away. And I think I said something stupid like, "Well, you could have lived."
Fans still say that. They're like, he could live. I'm like, he got exploded.
Yeah,
he got exploded.
I get why you don't want to admit it, but they really slammed the door in that character's face.
Wang comes back in season 2 with just a little scar on his face like you did in the pilot, where you somehow survived a space battle.
Well, they have the technology. Come on.
They can rebuild Wang into a robot Wang.
Hey, listen, you guys, I've got to split. Do you want to get to something that you...
Yeah, I mean, for all of the stuff going on with this series over the years, what's your big takeaway, like, of what the show meant overall? Well,
I think you I can't remember if we were rolling yet when you talked about how you watched it when you were young.
Yeah.
There's an age group of people that are, you were too young to watch it when it first came out. So you found it, but there's a certain segment of the audience that watched it when they were kids, I don't know, 10, 15, whatever, who are revisiting it now. And I think it was one of those things like we all had. I mean, I had shows like that that I watched in the mid 60s that mean a lot to me because of that period in my life. It was, and when you have a show that really explores values that are meaningful, relationships that are forged in hardship, and the issues like you say, like bigotry and we remember those things. We remember those. Those are really influential, and so looking back on it, revisiting them later on as we've come to as our values are more formed and mature, it reaffirms those key elements of our character, and how that spoke to us. I think that answers your question.
Yeah.
And I have one last one that I'm just really curious about. Okay. By the end of the series, do you think that McQueen saw himself as a wild card or still saw himself as an angry angel?
Oh, I think even before the end of the series. I couldn't tell you the exact moment. I think it's a series of moments. I don't know if it's maybe the Butts episode. Because that's when I really went to bat for them. Don't fuck with my people, sort of.
Yeah.
This is my family. The pancake thing and all that.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? Am I right?
Yeah, I think Ray Butts is a favorite for many people. And as a kid who watched it, that's the one episode I remembered because it was in my youth. It was the fun episode because of this silly pancake. But then you watch it as an adult, it's like, oh, this is deeply depressing. And Ray Butts is almost like a bizarro, twisted version of McQueen where he's lost his guys and he's like this broken shell. And he's kind of like...
sorry.
I was going to say he's kind of like a warning of what could happen to the 58th and even to McQueen.
Yeah, but in a really cool way, because and interestingly, Steve Rankin is one of my best buddies and has been since oh my God, 40 years. I met him in '85, I think. We did a Shakespeare together at the Old Globe, and so he was when I heard he was casting in that's another one I put in the same category as Martin Jarvis. Was an amazing performance, and that to this day, I mean, he's one of my best pals. I love him dearly.
Yeah, and I think he's probably one of the guest stars that everyone associates with this show, like Ray Butts, the character in that performance.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And he's an interesting guy. Like, I know him from American Gothic as well as like these two shows that were on as like great one-off seasons that could have gone longer.
And Star Trek too.
Yeah,
done a lot of Star Trek. I think he's done a few of them. Yeah.
Oh, he's been around. But to let you go, before we go, I think we have to obviously ask: do you have any projects in the works? Do you have anything going on right now?
Well, I wrote a play that I performed last year in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. Premiered there. Developed it at the Ojai Playwrights Conference, called "Leave Your Fears Here." And it's a solo piece. It's just me. And my son is the star of the show, however. And I'll be doing it in Atlanta in March at the Synchronicity Theater, produced by the Georgia Ensemble Theater. And then I'm doing it again in June in Whidbey Island, which is in the Puget Sound near Seattle. So that's those two things are coming up. Very proud of those.
So what does your one-man show, your play, what's it about? What's it exploring?
It's exploring my son's experience and my family's experience with his brain cancer when he was 10 years old. It's I know it sounds dark and scary and horrible, and but it's actually there was a happy ending. So it's an exploration of how he changed me through that process, and what an amazing human being he is, and how he continues to this day to change every life he comes in contact with. So I'm excited about bringing that to people. I'd love to bring it to Australia.
Yeah. Heck, if you ever film it, I would love to see it, because I, as someone who's done acting myself, I really love those type of performances where it's like a true life thing that you're bringing it out. For someone like yourself, you've had a long career, obviously playing other characters, having to be a part of like a 3-act structure story. But have you ever had to do anything like this before? Was this just one of those cases where this incident in your life was just so profound that you had to create it into something artful?
Yeah, I had to. This is my way of processing it. For sure. And no, I've never done anything like this. And I was sort of inspired to do it. I mean, I started writing it years ago, but Joel does an amazing one-man show. Talk to him about his, and he's wonderful in it. He drove down from New Jersey to Great Barrington to see my play. I loved it. I loved that. It's me playing myself, but as I'm an actor playing a guy who is an actor, but it's me, and it's a combination of these moments where I'm definitely the actor, but I play every part in it. All the doctors and nurses, and my son, and so no, I've never done anything like this. It's next level stuff for me. I walked through a lot of fear to do this.
It sounds like a beautiful piece.
Oh, thank you. I'll definitely keep you posted.
Yeah, we look forward to getting some updates, and we both just want to thank you so much for giving your time to us to
My
talk
pleasure.
a little
Thanks
bit
for
about
asking me.
Space Above and Beyond.
I'm glad it worked out. Thank you.
Yeah, it's such a joy to be able to speak to people, and this is our first time doing this, but we live in this time now where anyone can come back and make content, podcast, YouTube videos, whatever, review, analyze, go through any piece of media. And we're looking at a show that you did decades ago now as one of your first big things, and I'm just like, is it weird to be on that side where it's like suddenly there's these people being like, hey, we're going through every episode of a show you did from long ago? Because nowadays I think that's more expected with like shows currently on, but with something like Space Above and Beyond, it's one that I sadly I think has fallen between the cracks a little too much, and we were just wanting to do that. We wanted to give it the time.
I appreciate you doing that very much, and I know the rest of the cast feels the same way. The other thing I wanted to say before I split is that you are doing a fantastic job.
Thank you so much.
So, and I've done a few of these things, and never for a moment would I have guessed that you've never done this before. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, good work.
Well, you have a good one, and yes, we'll make sure to let everyone know about your upcoming projects. We'll link stuff, and you'll send us stuff, and everyone make sure to follow James on whatever social medias or websites you have out there. Is there any in particular that you're on that people can keep track of you?
Instagram mostly. Yeah.
Get those golf updates.
I'll golf updates.
Tucker Smallwood does keep us updated on you golfing.
I'll definitely keep you updated on my swing progress. The jpmorrison.com I think has everything on it. So,
but we'll make sure to include that in the description for everyone to have a look at. This was such a joy. Thank you so much.
They're showing up. Oh, the mirror.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right,
Pointing
you guys.
at the posters.
Thank you. Pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure. See ya.
Adios.
Wow. Rachel, we made our way through it. We're learning as we're going.
I'm giddy. Sorry.
Giddy time. And you managed to keep it in your pants.
I knew that you were going to do it sometime, and I'm just glad.
I kept it in my pants. He's such a handsome guy. That voice.
Thank you for not doing that in front of him.
He's not a mark at a singles bar, Rachel. He's not a mark at a singles bar. He's married. With a kid and everything. But no, I hope everyone, you've enjoyed what we've done here. We're hopefully going to be able to talk to more of the cast and crew from Space Above and Beyond, because again, not many people are looking at this series in a way that we have been. And since we were doing our podcast and doing our episodes on it, it's brought this awareness to the cast and crew and making them look back and want to chat to people about it and kind of get more into it. And as we always were doing with our episodes, watch the series for yourself. Go out there, give it a view. It's on YouTube currently. If there's a legal way you can watch it, make sure to find that way. But for sake of convenience, that's obviously the best one to go with. But hopefully down the line, you'll be seeing more interviews with us and certain people from the cast and crew. Next, we're hopefully going to get Joel, who plays Wang in the show. He was our main point of contact, as you could gather from the interview. So
he was our in.
And so keep an eye out on this feed. Make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel where we upload the video of this. And if you're not following us on the regular podcatchers, you should make sure to do so, as well as all of our social medias. Heck, if you follow us on social media, you'll see us having exchanges with some of these people. So it's absolutely delightful. And if you want to support the podcast, where can people do that, Rachel?
They can go to where all of this started, which is our Patreon, which is where we released the Space Above and Beyond episodes first. And That's how you can financially support the work that we're doing covering these shows, and as well as giving us a follow and a like and comment on those social medias that Ryan was mentioning before. Or you can shoot us an email at yumyumpod@gmail.com.
Well, enough plugging, enough of all of that. I hope that one of the people that got the promotional photos sent over in America was Pags. If you watch the video, you can see my eyes holding back the urge to scream Pags, Pags, Pags. But
forever in our hearts.
Forever in our hearts. R.I.P. Pags.